Hi, and welcome to the Business Administration Apprenticeship at Level 3. In this video, I'm going to go through a little bit about what this qualification is all about, what you're going to gain from it, and then we'll go through the structure of it, we'll go through the different stages, and explain how it's assessed to give you a good introduction to this qualification. So, what is an apprenticeship? Essentially, an apprenticeship is to allow people who are either changing careers or who are starting a new job. So, traditionally, it was people who had left school, usually younger learners, and they were looking to start a career. However, apprenticeships have been reformed and changed, and so now they're for anyone of any age who is looking to change role. And an apprenticeship is essentially a structured program of learning which helps to support that change. It can be a little bit daunting changing role, and you just have to figure it all out for yourself. Whereas with an apprenticeship, first of all, you've got the expectation that you're on this apprenticeship so that you are still learning, and you've also got that structured program to get you up to that competency level that is expected for the role that you're in. Apprenticeship standards are developed with stakeholders from industry and training. So what that means is that a group of representatives from industry and training have got together and they've worked out a list of competencies. So these are things which someone within that role, so in this case business administration, would have to be able to perform to do that role. They've drawn up this list, and to complete the apprenticeship you have to produce a portfolio of evidence which proves that you have actually performed those skills to a very good level, to a competent level. And that's what it means by vocational or competency based. It's a list of things which you have to be able to do and you've got to demonstrate you can do them. That's what makes it different from school or college or university, and that in those types of qualifications you would learn knowledge from a book and then you would write an essay, sit an exam, based around the knowledge that you've learned. Whereas in this qualification, you've got to show that you've actually performed these tasks in the workplace. And that's where the qualifications value comes from. So business administrators have a key skill set. Business administration is a function within all businesses of any type and size. And the key skills that a business administrator must have and be able to demonstrate is largely around communication and interpersonal skills, but also around organisation, time management, and technical detail, being able to do things such as proofreading. There's also things such as taking initiative and managing priorities. These are key skills which a business administrator has to be able to perform in any context, and that's who this qualification is suited towards. So what will you get out of this qualification? First of all, you'll receive a Level 3 apprenticeship in Business Administration. You'll also receive your functional skills at Level 2 in both Maths and English. And finally, you'll also receive a portfolio of evidence which you've put together which demonstrates your competence in your role. Once you've completed this apprenticeship, there are a number of routes which you could progress on to. The first one will be that the aim should be for you to progress onto a career within your industry. There are other options available, so you may wish to go on and complete a higher level apprenticeship, whether that's a level 4 apprenticeship or potentially a degree level apprenticeship. You may wish to look at enrolling on a business related undergraduate degree. That will depend on the acceptance criteria, which is different for each institution. Or you could look to complete a business related professional qualification such as a diploma from the Chartered Management Institute or the Association of Project Managers. And finally, another option would be to specialise in a particular role. So this might not necessarily be to be promoted, but to focus on a specific area within administration such as HR or finance. So look at the qualification framework to see where this qualification sits. This is a level 3 apprenticeship. You can see there on the column in the right hand side. So that is roughly equivalent to A level or a national diploma. It's worth noting, however, this doesn't show the credit value, only the level of difficulty. Credit value is essentially how many learning hours, so 1 credit means 10 learning hours to achieve that qualification. So that there's no distinction between the size of the qualification, but in in terms of level of difficulty, that is equivalent to A level. So on the screen is the KSBs, the knowledge, skills and behaviours. This is the criteria which this qualification is assessed against. So it's these things which are on the screen that you have to be able to demonstrate in your endpoint assessment and at various stages throughout your apprenticeship. And they tie in with the key skills which all business administrators should have. It's not important at this stage to go into a lot of detail. You can look at the assessment strategy document, which will outline a lot more detail precisely what it is you have to cover, but this gives you an idea of the sorts of things that we're looking to cover in this qualification and the things that you're going to learn about. The apprenticeship should last approximately 18 to 24 months, although the duration is flexible. Some learners will complete the apprenticeship more quickly than others for various reasons, and if you don't complete by the 24 months, if there's good reason, we can look to extend that time frame as well. But you cannot complete in under 12 months. There are a few different stages to the apprenticeship. So the first one is the learner induction period, so this is enrolment and planning. You've then got the on-programme stage. Sometimes this stage is called the learning and assessment stage, and it is the longest stage of your apprenticeship. You then move on to gateway, which is a check to ensure that you're ready to complete your endpoint assessment. And then the final stage is the endpoint assessment, and it's in this stage that you complete all of your assessments which go towards calculating the grade for this qualification. So let's go through each of those stages to explain what's involved. The first stage, the learner induction period, you'll complete your induction paperwork. You'll also look to spend some time during this phase to reflect and identify your learning level and areas of focus with your employer and your assessor. This could be through completing learning styles questionnaires, for example, by understanding your motivations for completing this apprenticeship and looking at your job and what things you're going to be responsible for to pick out the key things which you'll be looking to be learning about and assessed against. And this will result in an individual training and learning and assessment plan. The individual teaching learning assessment plan is essentially a list of training activities for you to complete and assessments for you to complete that's specific to both you and your role. Once you have produced your individual learning and assessment plan, you can move on to the next phase, which is on-programme. Sometimes the on-programme phase is referred to the learning and assessment phase because that's the two activities which you complete during that period. So we'll look at them in turn. So your learning and assessment plan will have a list of learning activities for you to complete, and during this phase you will complete those learning activities. There may also, depending on the delivery plan, be a list of standard training which is delivered, such as classroom workshops or online units. These training activities will count towards your 20% off the job training, and your learning plan essentially should be a plan as to how you'll achieve that 20% off the job training. It is a requirement of this apprenticeship and all apprenticeships that learners spend 20% of their time completing off-the-job training. However, a lot of this training is stuff that would be required anyway, and all of the time spent towards your working on your apprenticeship will count towards this time. There are a number of ways which you can achieve this. Working on your apprenticeship, attending calls with your assessor, gathering evidence counts, and there's a lot of workplace training activities which will be agreed between you and your assessor. Your assessor can help you identify what those activities could be for you to complete in the workplace. And you'll be able to log this training through your journal, which is part of your portfolio, to show that that training has taken place. So also in this learning phase, you would keep a track of all the learning that you've completed, all of the training in your journal. Once you're then competent, because you've learned how to do these things, you would then complete an assessment. What this means is you'll gather a portfolio of evidence which demonstrates that you're competent at performing those skills in the workplace. And also, during this assessment phase, either before or during the apprenticeship, but prior to the endpoint assessment, so potentially you could look to do this in Gateway if it's not been achieved already, you'd be looking to achieve a Level 2 qualification for your functional skills in Maths and English. You may already have this qualification, in which case it will be assessed by recognised prior learning. However, if you don't, you'll be guided through how to complete that by your assessor. You then move on to the Endpoint Assessment Gateway. Gateway is essentially an evaluation and a discussion with the apprentice to review your portfolio of evidence, and it's led by your employer, which will include the training provider and mentor. So essentially it is a check to ensure that you have met all of the requirements for endpoint assessment to move into that stage. So you'd have to check that you have, first of all, completed the minimum length of time on programme, and that you've achieved the requirements at Gateway. And during this stage, it's not just yourself and the assessor, the training provider, which is involved. Your mentor in your workplace will also have input to this. So it's not just a case of looking at the minimum requirements, but it's a discussion to say, look, are you genuinely ready to move on to endpoint assessment? So what happens during this phase? Well, your portfolio is checked and reviewed. We check that you've got your functional skills in maths and English, and we'd also complete mock endpoint assessments to help prepare you for that endpoint assessment. Once that has been passed, you'd move on to the endpoint assessment. So during endpoint assessment, we look to review the full range of knowledge, skills and behaviours that are listed in the standard, and there is 3 assessment methods which are used here. So there's 3 assessments. So there is a knowledge test, there is a presentation, and there's a professional discussion. So we'll go through each of those. And the duration for the endpoint assessment is around 3 months. So the first assessment that you would complete in this phase is the knowledge test. This is a multiple choice test which lasts around 60 minutes. There is 50 equally weighted multiple choice questions with 4 answers each. Typically this is the first assessment which you'll be given during the endpoint assessment phase. The test is completed online and requires invigilating. And the questions predominantly focus on non-organisational specific knowledge, which is outlined in the standard. So this includes the outcomes of the knowledge points on relevant regulation and laws, business fundamentals and project management principles. And you can see a full list of that in the endpoint assessment strategy guide. The next assessment method that's used is the portfolio-based interview. When you're in endpoint assessment, you'll be allocated an independent endpoint assessor. So this is someone who's different from the assessor that you've had up until this point, from the start of your journey on the apprenticeship to endpoint assessment. And they're the person who will conduct this assessment method. They'll conduct your interview. The interview is based around your portfolio, so your portfolio would be sent to your endpoint assessor ahead of this. They'll review the portfolio and they'll then come up with a list of questions which to ask you based around your portfolio. And essentially you'll just be talking about that evidence, giving your reasons why you've completed that task in the way that you did, what you've learned from it, or what you might do differently. So the interview will assess your understanding of the portfolio to validate that it is your work. It'll assess your self-reflection of your performance and ensure that you've been able to apply these appropriate behaviours and skills in the workplace. And it also tests your judgment and decision-making skills. The KSBs which this assessment method focuses on is primarily the specific ones listed in the assessment strategy. So you'd review that document to see the specific list. And the final assessment is the project presentation. So with this, you have to complete a project. The project is completed from month 9 of your apprenticeship, so that's in the on-programme phase, and completed for Gateway. And you're assessed through the presentation based on that project. The presentation will last about 10 to 15 minutes, and there'll be an additional 10 to 15 minutes of question and answers following that presentation. The project which you complete should be around some sort of business process or change in the workplace, and you'll have 9 months at the start of your apprenticeship to identify an appropriate task. So it should be around something about how you've improved the process, what steps you've taken to implement that project, and what worked well and what might change in the future, how might this impact the business going forward. The presentation should summarise the aim, outcomes and responsibilities of the KSB shown in the project, and the presentation should demonstrate how you approach this task and the skills that you've shown. You can use digital tools such as PowerPoint or Prezi to produce the presentation. The project should last about 21 to 35 working hours over your apprenticeship. You should be involved in scoping, planning, managing, communicating, monitoring and reporting results of this project, and it should be usually a process improvement. This assessment method focuses on the KSBs around project or process improvement that are outlined in the KSBs. And again, you can see that full list in the assessment strategy guide. Once you've completed these 3 assessment methods, you would then be given a grade. If you get a pass or a fail, first of all, is what you're looking at. Most learners obviously would expect to get a pass at this stage because you'll be prepared for it over the previous 18 months. However, if you do exceptionally well on your endpoint assessment, you can receive a distinction. And to see precisely how the scores add up, that can be seen in the endpoint assessment strategy guide. So just to summarise the journey, sometimes it's easier to see it in this sort of graphical or map format. You would start off your journey by creating that plan, the individual learning and assessment plan. You'd then move on to the on-programme phase where you would complete training. So you'd complete workplace training, and you'd also complete training on your functional skills. And this is all logged in the journal, which is where you log your training. Once you've become competent because you've completed workplace training and you've performed that task a number of times in the workplace, you would then produce a portfolio of evidence that demonstrates that you can perform those tasks. And that is an assessment during the on-programme phase to help prepare you for that endpoint assessment. Once this has been done and the minimum time on programme has elapsed, you can move on to Gateway, which is a check to make sure that you have completed all the requirements for endpoint assessment and that you're ready to progress, which also includes a mock endpoint assessment. And then finally, you'd move on to endpoint assessment, where you'll be allocated an independent endpoint assessor, and you'll complete those 3 assessments and ultimately be awarded this qualification. So thanks, and hopefully that makes clear the structure of the qualification and what's going to happen next.